everybody, welcome back. How are you all, most importantly, because we're 2021 now, and to be honest, it's not feeling a lot more different than 2020. We've all kind of adjusted a bit now, but mental health wise, I know quite a few people are struggling, and I just hope that all my subscribers and everything are doing well, really. And so yeah, just checking in on how you are. Anyway, my name's Amy, for those of you who don't know, or maybe aren't already subscribed. So on my channel, I like to talk about my weird and wonderful pets and show you any enclosures that I'm building and try and talk you through how to do it yourself. And sometimes I'll even do like basic care guides like I'm doing today. So yeah, recently I've had a few requests that I do like species specific mantis care videos. So today's going to be a ghost mantis care video. If you know me, you know that I've owned an array of different inverts, especially mantids, different species of mantids. I have actually produced an orchid mantis care guide. Now this is quite an in-depth orchid mantis care guide. It's a two-parter, so yeah, it's quite a chunky bit of material there. So what I'm trying to aim for with these now is species specific and trying to keep them in 15 minutes or less. If after watching this video you think you would like a little bit more in-depth information about keeping these mantids, then I highly suggest you head over to my other video on the orchid mantis care. So yeah, the two parts, unfortunately, sorry. But yeah, I go into a lot more detail, and even though it's for orchid mantids, there's a lot of crossover between mantids. Mainly the things that are changing between each species are going to be your humidity, heat, and also like the type of enclosure that you're keeping your mantis in. If you're interested in seeing any of my other uploads that are going to be coming up in the future, then definitely subscribe, and I'd also suggest turning on your notification bell. You can do that by pressing the bell icon, and then you can change it to all notifications, and that way then you're not going to miss any information that I've got going out. Also, I am quite active on Instagram. I do a little bit on TikTok, but I'm more active on Instagram, so if you head on over there, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions, and you'll get more updates there as well. If you've got any questions, or you feel like maybe I've given a little bit of wrong information, or you might have something extra to add, definitely leave a comment down below, because I do really appreciate that feedback, and I'll get back to you. So right now I'm going to stop rambling and we're going to get straight into the guts of the video. I'm also going to include from now on a little disclaimer type page. I'm not going to read through it or anything. I'm just going to pop it in as a page. You can pause the video, you can read through it. There's going to be a lot of useful information on there, just so that you're aware of what I think you should know before ever owning pretty much any animal, really. So yeah, feel free to pause the video now and you can read that disclaimer as soon as it comes up. Otherwise you can carry on with the video and read it afterwards. So this is just a short basic care guide then of how to look after ghost mantids as pets. Now you might have already seen my unboxing video when I had these three tiny little aliens arrive. Ghost mantids, they're also known by their scientific name as Philocrania paradoxa. So I will be adding a couple of little scientific terminologies in these videos, but I don't really want to overwhelm anyone, and I want to make this video available to all ranges of mantis keepers. Now, Philocrania paradoxa, these are actually considered like a beginner species, and they are an excellent beginner species of mantis. So they're around about 4.5 to 5 centimeters adult size in length, and they originate from Africa. And what's really interesting about them is that they look a bit like dead leaves. Now a lot of mantids kind of take on this kind of mimicry type thing. They've evolved to blend in with their surroundings. So these ones are really interesting in that the dead leaf appearance, they are mimicking the plants, a couple of species of plants that are native to their geographical regions, which I just think is really, it's just amazing. Nature is so amazing, isn't it? And yeah, so obviously they can just sit still, they can do a little wobble now and again, and they just look like a little dead leaf so that they're not preyed upon. Now, like I said, they're a great starter mantis, and they are relatively, in terms of mantids, quite tame. Now, I'm not trying to put you off other mantids. If I was to compare these to my budwing mantis does like to attack me quite a bit. With the ghost mantids, they are quite a tame species. So yeah, they are an excellent beginner species and very easy to look after. So now let's start off with housing then, nice and simple. Now, as I've spoken about on other previous videos, there are some mantids that don't have the ability to climb any smooth surfaces. So you want to avoid with those sorts any glass or acrylic enclosures. Now, the way I remember this is impucid. They're pretty poo at climbing glass, if you know what I mean. So yeah, impucid type mantids are the ones that are pretty poo at climbing glass. Now, what's great with ghost mantis is they're not impucids. That just means that they're not from the family of mantids that don't have the ability to in effect, suck their feet onto the glass and walk up the glass. I know that's not the actual process by which they climb up the glass. That's going to be like your violin mantis, your devil's flower mantis, etc. Now, whatever enclosure that you do opt for, I would highly suggest putting a bit of mesh over the top or getting one with a mesh lid, just so that they can easily hang from there when it's time to mould. So talking about moulding then, your enclosure will need to be at a minimum of 3 times the length of the mantis and 2 times the depth and the width of the mantis. And the reason why this is suggested is because it will facilitate the mantis in the molting process. Now, what I mean by that is they will hang from the top, and when they come through their exoskeleton, there's plenty of room for them to get back onto the top to dry out nicely, which will prevent any like mismolts or anything, or prevent them from hitting the bottom when they are molting. You can opt for a larger enclosure, but be aware that the smaller mantids may have trouble finding their food unless you're actually like tongue feeding them. Now, when I say the size of your mantis, I mean the size your mantis is when you have it or at that particular time. So it's all well and good that you could go out and get a 20 by 30 centimetre enclosure, but then if you've got a very small mantis, then they're going to be quite lost in there. What you're going to want to do is regularly upgrade your mantis throughout the period of its lifetime. 20 across by 30 centimetre high enclosure would be absolutely perfect for an adult ghost mantis. That could be in the form of a glass enclosure like a vivarium, or it could be an acrylic type enclosure. With your enclosure also, you're going to want to make sure that there's adequate cross ventilation in there. Now, I've covered this quite in depth in my orchid mantis video. Just make sure that there is plenty of ventilation, side and top ventilation. That's what I mean by cross ventilation, so you've got a nice airflow throughout the enclosure. Next, then, you're going to want to be thinking about your substrate. So that could be in the form of coconut fibre or a coir fibre substrate, or it could be kitchen towel, either of which is perfectly fine for a ghost mantis. So for your enclosure, you're also going to want to purchase yourself a hygrometer and a thermometer. You can get a combined one in like a digital form, which will measure both humidity and the heat of your enclosure. When it comes to decorating out your enclosure, now I've also gone into this in depth in the Orchid Mantis Care video. You can do a live planted type setup, and they are quite difficult, especially if you're just beginning. So typically what they're kept in is just their substrate and then a couple of sticks going upwards. I tend to keep them quite vertical. Again, this has been covered in another video, just to make sure that you're not going to be getting a mantis molting from the side and hitting anything that's obstructing its molt. So you can get some sticks, pop them up nice and vertical all the way to the top so they can get to the top for a nice molt, and there's not going to be anything jutty out that's going to obstruct their molt. Same when it comes to if you want to put any like fake plants in there, just make sure there's not too much foliage and it's not too cluttered in there, because you don't want that mantis having any sort of mismold and could potentially die. Okay, we're doing well. We're on to heating already. Heating, you want to know your different types of heating. You can have overhead heating. This is the most preferred way for mantids. So that could be in the form of a heat lamp or a heat emitter. Now, if you don't want to go down that road, you can actually use heat mats, or you can use like reptile cable, which is like a heated cable. I tend to use heat mats, and I'll put them on the side of the enclosure rather than underneath, just because out in the wild, when they're having sun radiating and thermal energy coming from obviously above them, they naturally gravitate to go upwards in their enclosure if they're too cold and downwards if they're too hot. Now, having a heat mat underneath kind of disorientates them in a very simple way. So if you are going to use a heat mat, I would suggest using it on the side of the enclosure. And also, if you get a longer heat mat, or if you're using reptile cable or heat cable, then you can heat multiple enclosures at the same time. Now, daytime temperatures, you want to keep an eye on that. So you want to make sure that whatever heat source that you are using is linked to a thermostat. Now, this will stop it from overheating and killing your mantis. It'll also stop any like fires or anything. So if something's getting too hot and catches fire, then obviously it's for your safety as well as the mantis. So if you've got that, you can program that then to not go higher than a certain level. So with your ghost mantis, you want to keep it around about a mid-range of 26 degrees throughout the day, and you don't really want to drop that lower than around about 19 or 18 degrees at night. Now, there is a little bit of give and take. You can have your orchid mantis set up anywhere between 20 and, if it's 26, I wouldn't really go higher than 28 personally, and that's degrees Celsius. Relative humidity, so that's what I tend to go by with my hygrometers. So they're measured in relative humidity, and I tend to keep it between 50 and 80%, so around about 60% would be fine. Now, mantids do actively drink, and another way of keeping the humidity up as well is by misting the enclosure. And you can do this around about twice a day. You don't want to directly mist the mantis, they don't tend to like that, so just mist around them so that they can actively actually drink, but you don't actually want a water bowl in there because that is a major drowning risk for your mantis. This misting then, as I said, will also help up your humidity if it's a little low. If you're finding it's getting a little bit too humid in there, lay off on the misting as much, still providing them though with a mist to be able to drink. Okay, heating done. So now we're going to go on to feeding. It's all going to be based on the size of what your ghost mantis is at that time. These are instars, they're measured in instars. This has also been covered in that other video, so I'm not going to go into it here because I wanted to really try and keep this as short as possible for you guys. Probably have them around about L2, L3, that's when I had mine. So this is just each molt that they're having. And then you have L3 and L4, L5, etc, etc. Now your L1 and L2s are mainly going to be with your breeder, and they're going to be fed on quite small species of fruit flies. Now as you're getting into L2, L3 type area, you're going to be still feeding fruit flies, but they're the larger size. So these are going to be D. hydi, Drosophila hydi, however you want to pronounce it, it doesn't matter. I'll put the spelling in the video. In that Orchid Mantis Care video, again, I've got in there how I normally culture up my flies and everything, just so you've got a constant supply of your flies. So L4s will also take your smaller Drosophila hydi flies, but they'll start wanting something a bit more substantial. So that's when you can start from L4, L5 onwards, start wanting to give them a more substantial meal. So this might be in the form of house flies that you might be breeding yourselves, or green bottles or blue bottle flies. Now ghost mantids, they're quite cute and everything, but they will just hang around and not do a hell of a lot through the day. So when you feed in and everything, they don't tend to run after prey. They're more of an ambush predator, and they will just wait, acting like a leaf as they do, and they will just grab prey when it comes to them. So like I said, you don't want a massive enclosure so that they can't find their prey anywhere. They want something that literally walks past their face. I tend to tongue feed mine, especially when it comes to the houseflies and everything, as I know they are getting their meal. What I tend to do, I've got L2, L3. I will salt and pepper the Drosophila into their enclosure. I'll try and put about 5 in. I put that in almost every day. It depends if there's any left over from the day before. So I know they've got a constant supply in there. And then when they become a little bit bigger, I'll be offering them house flies or blue bottle flies. So they might take 1, 2 a day, something like that. Now I haven't tried this with my ghost mantis, as this is the first time I've actually owned this species, even though they are a beginner species. But yeah, my other mantids do really like the very small, not the big versions, the small Turkestan roaches and dubia roaches and things like that. Some of my really big giant Asians will also take locusts, so there are options as well with feeding those. You don't want to feed anything that's too heavy for them, because the way they're built and everything, they haven't got the strength in their arms to hold anything substantial like a small locust or something. And they tend to say to judge it around about the size of the head of the mantis. Now, I don't really do that because their heads in some species are quite small, and I've seen quite small ones eat substantially larger prey items than their head. But yeah, you don't want anything too heavy when they're older that they can't actually lift up, as they just can't lift up the weight. You can also offer them like small mealworms or something like that, and a waxworm when they're older, maybe as a little treat, but obviously they're quite high in sugar and they're not exactly great to be feeding all the time. So that's housing, that's heating, and that's feeding done. That is the main bulk of looking after a ghost mantis. Other than that, I'm going to tell you about how to sex your mantis. Now, most mantis are quite easy to find out the gender and everything. You count the abdominal sections at the back of the mantis. Males tend to have more segments, so around about 8, and females have 6. Again, another weird way of remembering things. Males have the longer bit. So yeah, they have 8, whereas females have 6. Also with the ghost mantis, they have quite an extravagant headpiece on their head, and this can also be used as a way of finding out their gender. Your males are going to have quite an extravagant looking, thin, kind of twisty headpiece, whereas the females is more stout and a little bit more triangular in shape. Ghost mantis are said to be the least cannibalistic type mantis to have, and people also keep them in communal setups. Now, personally, I don't do that, and I wouldn't recommend it, just because you don't know that individual animal. There are plenty of stories out there where they've had a communal setup, and yeah, one has gone completely serial killer and killed all its tank mates. So I won't actually advise that to you, but that's totally up to you and to do your own research on. So I hope I've managed to actually stop rambling as much as I normally do, and I've managed to condense this down enough to be like a 10 or 15 minute video We'll see. I'll find out when I'm editing. Thank you so much for watching. There's going to be a few more species-specific care guides coming soon. Take care. Head over to my Instagram, click subscribe, and I'll see you all soon. Thanks very much for watching.